Welcome back to the Conscious Biotech Exec, where biotech leaders talk about careers that are not traditionally covered in undergrad, but are available for those with a Bachelor's of Science degree. I'm your host, Claudia Villamore. Today, we will be diving into the in-house CRA role, one of many clinical research roles available to people with a Bachelor's of Science. I have a special guest today who will share her career journey. Together, we will provide insights to help you understand what in-house CRAs do, the skill set needed to move into the role and manage your career. Ketaki, welcome, and thank you for joining us today.
Hi, Claudia. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Thank you. So, Ketaki, let's start with a little background on you. You work for Edwards Life Sciences, a global leader in patient-focused medical innovations for structural heart disease. How long have you been with Edwards, and what is your current role there?
I've been with Edwards for about 7 years now. And my current role is of a senior clinical project manager, and I manage a global clinical trial, the structural heart space. And when I say global, we have US, Canada, Japan, Australia, and Europe as a part of the trial.
Wow. Okay. So you're managing a global study for a cardiovascular device. Very, very cool.
Correct.
What was your first role with Edwards?
Yeah, so I joined Edwards as a senior in-house CRA, and then I was presented with an opportunity to be a people leader. So that means managing in-house CRAs. So I did people management for about 3 to 4 years, and then I moved into clinical project management.
Got it. Very cool. Well, congrats on moving into project management. Having worked with you before, I know how lucky they are to have you in that department. Let's go back in time. What did you study in college, and what was your very first role in biotech?
I did my bachelor's in biological sciences, and then I did my master's also in biological sciences with a focus on immunology. So I was a thesis student. So I had a research project that I was going to research on and produce some results. And, I had to defend my research. So that's what I did with my education. And then my first role in research was in a medical device startup as a clinical data manager. So don't get fooled with the manager piece of it. I really was in managing people or managing project. It was just that title, but it was a really foot in the door for me in clinical research.
Got it. So you were a clinical data manager to begin with. You worked on a research project as a part of your master's. And would you say that that's when you became aware of clinical research? Is that really what drove you to that clinical data manager role?
Yeah, so it's interesting as I look back when you ask me these questions. When I was doing my master's, obviously it was heavy on research. So I was in the lab probably 90% of my time doing research, running experiments and creating data. So as I was going through that educational journey, I definitely realized that I love research. I love biology or anything to do with sciences. So I love research, but I also found out I don't really like lab research. I don't want to be in the lab all the time running experiments. So that really motivated me to learn more about what's out there in the research arena, because I was getting close to graduating. So I wanted to figure out what my next step is going to be because I knew I didn't want to be in the lab. So that's when, I reached out to people. I reached out to my peers, my seniors in college, my professors, my mentors, and really tried to get an understanding of what research looks like, in the industry. And that's when I realized there is something called clinical research. And then, again, like being self-motivated, I reached out to folks on LinkedIn. LinkedIn wasn't very prominent at that time as it is now, but it was still a great
Mm-hmm.
tool. So I reached out to people being self-motivated, and I said, "Hey, I see that you're in clinical research. I want to get to know a little bit more about the industry." And that's how I met a few people. They gave me some insights into it. And so I said, I want to give it a try. So I started looking for specifically clinical research opportunities. And this was the first role that landed in my lap.
Ketaki, your experience resonates so much with my experience in undergrad and honestly the experience of so many people that I've spoken to in the industry. We've shared stories about how also in undergrad, being close to graduating and realizing that we don't want to be in a lab, but not really knowing of any other careers out there that would still be in research because that's what we like. And having to kind of, find our own way and figure out what those opportunities look like and career growth could look like. So your story really resonates with me. And honestly, it speaks to also why we're doing this podcast, why we're doing what we're doing. I've had a lot of students still reach out to me about careers and not knowing there's this whole list of career paths that don't require more than a bachelor's of science. We'll keep talking about this, but I just kind of wanted to build that in here because it's so tied to why we're doing what we're doing right now. So let's talk about, I mean, you've kind of already talked about how you've managed your career. What about if you could attribute your success to a single skill, what would it be?
Can I have two skills?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
It's just hard to say single skill would look like. But I think what comes to mind is being comfortable in a uncharted path or a role that I didn't know anything about. So I think that skill set to say, okay, I don't know, but I have the willingness to figure it out, and I have the self motivation to, do well and figure it out. I think that skill definitely, like all throughout my career, I didn't know how to manage people. Like I just didn't know. I was a great CRA, but never done people leadership. But my leadership saw something in me. They prompted me to look into it. I could have literally said, nope, I don't know how this works, and I'm not going to take on this role. But I did. I was like, let me try it. Probably I'm going to fail, but I'm going to learn a lot from it. So I think that skill set is definitely key, and I still use it. When I'm doing something new and I don't know how to do it, but I have to figure it out. And the other skill set I would say that has really helped me is being driven. Like I'm very result oriented. I have a goal in mind, whether it be a small project, whether it be leading a global trial. I'm definitely very result driven. I'm not going to do things just for doing it. It has to mean something to patients, to our community, to my career, to the team. So I think these two skills I would say have definitely helped me a lot.
Okay, so your willingness to figure it out and being driven and results oriented, especially to things that are tied to your values, that's what helps drive you. I could see
Yeah.
how, wow, these skills would definitely help you as a CRA, as a project manager, honestly, in any role you would ever want to go into. These are super, super great skills to have. Perfect. So since you were talking a little bit about managing CRAs, what are some other skills that you had to develop when you started managing CRAs?
It's interesting. I did not know people leadership is it's a hard role. And you only know it when you do it. It's kind of that. So talk about, I want to manage people, I want to manage a team. It is definitely hard. Than being an individual contributor, I would say that. In my role as a people leader or managing in-house CRAs, I definitely learned leadership skills or soft skills, if you will. It was not so much about technical expertise because I was already getting that, or I had built some foundational blocks in my career, with technical skill set. But people management or managing CRAs really taught me leadership style. Like, what is my leadership style? Soft skills such as patience, because you're dealing with people. You're not dealing with paper or computer or something that doesn't have thoughts or feelings or opinions. So I think just having patience, knowing that one size doesn't fit all, so really catering your managing style to the in-house CRA needs, and building that listening skill set, like listen to people. What do they have to say? Where can you help out? Sometimes you just have to listen. You don't have to mentor or coach. So a lot of soft skills, I think, I was able to build with managing CRAs.
Okay, so it sounds like you were focused on your soft skills. That's what you started to hone. The key ones being patience, being able to adapt to different needs. I had a very similar experience. I remember having a growth mindset as a SME, and it's what got me the promotions. But to be honest, I didn't learn to apply my growth mindset to others until I became a manager. And for me, it was a game changer because it helped me see my team and myself as a work in progress, and mistakes turned into opportunities for learning. So essentially, it's kind of like what you said. Like for me, it helped me learn to step out of that shme mindset and learn to empower my CRAs to own their activities. Because I kept thinking, like, at the end of the day, like I'm supporting them, not like micromanaging their tasks. So that was something that I definitely, had to learn too, and that gave me more time to understand like what my cross-functional team members did, and it helped me learn like who to leverage, when to leverage them, and how. So that was key to me. It sounds like we had a pretty similar experience here.
People leadership is one of the, if you get an opportunity to do that, you should do it. And it'll be a total game changer, like you said. It'll open your eyes to, out there. And if you go back to being an individual contributor, like you're not really managing the team, you're managing a trial, for example, you are still going to have, you still have a great skill set that you have already have achieved or learned from being a people leader.
I agree. That was going to be my next question. So, to what you're saying, I do think that moving into a people leadership role helped me develop skills that not just help me in the professional setting, but even on a personal level, like being able to communicate differently with different people in the real world. So I think that's really important that you highlighted that. And since we're talking about some serious soft skills here, and you're now in project management, you essentially answered my next question, which was going to be that if the skills you learned as a CRA manager transfer well into project management, and you said yes. And I have to agree with you there, just based on my similar experience managing CRAs, and then moving into an individual contributor clinical project management role at Edwards too. So I have to agree with you there.
Yeah, and just to kind of chime in here as well, it's again, so you do bring in your skill set that you learn as a people leader, but in project management, as you know, Claudia, you really, they're not reporting into you. A lot of cross-functional teams are not reporting into you, so you have to motivate them and manage them without really being their manager. you know
Hmm.
like, how do
Hmm.
you influence people when they don't report to you? And I think that's when I draw from my people leadership experience.
Absolutely, because you said like being able to adapt to different needs, right? I could see how you would take that and then say, okay, what motivates this person? Let me figure out what that is, and then let me adapt to that. And that's how I can influence them. And then being able to do that for all the people, like all the different cross functions that you have to touch and lead, I think that's probably what makes you very successful in your current role too, right?
Yeah, I think influencing without authority is
Hmm.
what is very hard. But if you have people leadership experience, you can definitely thrive in that type of a situation.
Yeah, yeah, I can absolutely see that. So let's talk about in-house series, what they do, and how the scope varies in our industry. What activities and tasks did your in-house series perform?
In-house CRAs do multiple tasks, and I feel like it's pretty much standard now across pharma as well as medical device industry. So primarily, what I've seen my in-house CRAs do, and in general also out there in the industry, is obviously they're not traveling to sites for the most part. It's an office-based role, and they help out, from study startup, getting the clinical sites up and running on the protocol, making sure the training documentation is completed. It is all GDP compliant. The delegation of authority is complete. It makes sense. There are no gaps. There won't be any audit findings. Like, they review all the documents from study startup to study closeout, I would say, and really working closely with sites, monitors, project management. They touch a lot of other cross-functional teams in that process. They are also responsible for maintaining the trial master file, which is essentially, I think of as a storybook. When you go into your trial master file, you should know the story of the clinical trial. So they have to make sure that all the key communications, decisions, documentation is stored in the trial master files. So 5 years down the line, if FDA is knocking on our doors and we are in an audit, we can find things and we'll find decisions and communications that will be able to defend our stance and why we did what we did. I also see a change recently in the industry where in-house CRAs are also doing kind of central monitoring role. So where, industry is obviously, monitors have a high, they really bring a lot to the table because they're a face of the company, when they go to the clinical sites, but it is expensive. It is expensive to keep monitors and have a big monitoring team. So a lot of the industry is moving towards centralized monitoring role, and in-house CRAs perfectly fit into that because from being in the office, they can still work with the sites and they can make sure that the sites are in compliance with clinical data that is being gathered for the study. And at least going through, like, okay, how is the site doing on data entry? Do they have open queries? Are they following the protocol? Are they, entering protocol deviations on time? So that is also a role or aspect of in-house CRA role that I'm seeing picking up in the industry.
Yeah. So I want to say I love your analogy, maintaining a TMF and looking at that as a storybook. I think that's a really good way of teaching CRAs why it's so important, because filing in the TMF is not my favorite thing to do. But knowing why it's important is, why we do it. And, I have to say, so the skills that you just went over, I agree, the in-house series collecting the training documents and all of the regulatory documents that they need for startup and maintaining the TMF. That was all very similar for my in-house series too. We didn't have separate specialists at the time to handle the clinical trial agreements and budgets. And so the CRAs, they also had to negotiate those with the sites. And they had to support me with actually what you just mentioned, central data review and data cleaning. And they partnered with the field CRAs to close out action items between monitoring visits. And, this is something that you and I have talked about before, but it just kind of goes to show that the scope can vary depending on the experience that someone's had and the type of company that they're working for and the study phase. So I do want to just take a quick moment and advise our listeners here that the role that is right for them will depend on their long-term career plan. For example, if they're ready to commit to the CRA path, they may be better off at a small to mid-sized medtech or pharma company where they can wear many hats and develop a broad skill set in a short period. They could still choose to specialize down the line. And if they are committed to the CRA path and they know they want to, move into CRA management, kind of like you did, Ketaki, in the future, then a large medtech, pharma, or CRO company that has a predefined CRA to CRA management path can help them master this highly specific set of skills in a short time.
Like you said, if it's a startup or a mid-sized to a large, organization. So I've worked in startups before and I had to wear a lot of different hats. So there was no field monitor and in-house CRA. I was doing everything. I was traveling to sites, I was coming back. doing TMF management, making sure the documents are in place, doing site initiation visits. So everything under the sun, if you will, for, under the CRA umbrella. But as I moved into mid to large companies, it got more structured, but in a good way, because bigger companies, we run like 20 trials at the same time. You
Mhm.
need to have defined roles. You cannot have 5 people running the show. You know what I mean? So
Right.
I totally agree with you. I think the scope definitely varies. And, there are pros and cons of being in a startup versus, mid to large companies. But I guess, if you get to experience it all, you should go for it.
There's definitely pros and cons to both situations. It's just about understanding what those are up front and knowing what you're comfortable with, right? Going in so that you have a good experience and your responsibilities are going to match your expectations. Let's just put it that way. Let's move on to critical skills. Ketaki, what are some key skills you look for when interviewing in-house CRAs that are early in their career?
As a hiring manager, we have to look at the big picture. We look at the needs of the project, we look at the team dynamics that's already established. We look at the culture, of the company, and is it going to be the best fit? So sometimes, I've seen resumes that look perfect, but it's just not the right fit. So I just want to put that disclaimer out there. There's many other things that go into a hiring decision. But if I have to just stick to somebody who is entry level into in-house CRA role, like what I would look for, I would look for, do they have the willingness to learn? Because obviously they're green, right? They don't come with experience. They don't, maybe they've done CCRP or they've taken some certifications. That's great, but they don't have a direct industry experience. And we all started somewhere. So I actually look for, do they have the willingness to learn? Do they have basic organization? Can they display basic organization and good communication, concise, consistent communication style? Do they have attention to detail? Are they good at asking questions? And are they knowledge hungry? That's what I look for, because it's going to be a long pathway for them, right? To learn the skill sets, to learn how the industry works. And I think that I look for that drive or that spark, if you will.
Okay, that makes sense to me. I mean, so the willingness to learn, basic organization, and good communication, attention to detail. So these are some of the key skills that you would look for in a resume that you would want people to be able to highlight. And if they don't have the research experience per se, you'd want them to be able to translate that to you, right? During an
Correct.
interview.
Hmm. Yeah.
How an experience where they demonstrated these skills so that you can then put the pieces together of how they're going to perform on your projects. Thinking about project needs and team dynamics, taking that into consideration. On the flip side for listeners, this is important. It's important for you to not get bogged down too if somebody gives you a no on a culture fit, because at the end of the day, if you were to go in and there's not alignment, then you would also not just you just wouldn't have a good experience. Let's just put it that way, right? So it's good that I think, Ketaki, that you're looking at these team dynamics, and that you're looking for people to be a good fit for the team and for the culture at the company. That alignment is, I think, really important for both parties to have a good experience. What are some other skills that you look for when interviewing level 2 to senior in-house series?
Yeah, so that's when I feel like the game changes. When
Mhm.
I'm interviewing experienced CRAs, um, CRA twos like mid experience, or really having spent a long time in the industry, like senior CRAs, principal CRAs. Now I'm definitely going to look at what have they done in the past, how much knowledge, like technical knowledge, they have of the regulations. Do they have the ability to multitask? Can they handle stressful situations in terms of projects and deadlines? Can they, how are they with communication? What is their communication style? Um, and are they, again, this is just me personally, every hiring manager is different, but at that point, relationship building, because you are going to talk to
Mm.
different team members, you are going to talk to clinical sites, which are really hard to manage. And some principal investigators, as you probably know, Claudia, they're not easy to deal with. It is a hard world out there as you start getting experience. So do they have that skill set of relationship building? Again, so look for a combination of soft skills and technical skills. And really, are they able to work under pressure and multitask, and get, I think, I would say, how they apply their previous experience to new projects, new problems, and can they do problem solving based on their experience. Also, I typically look for, like, I would ask situational questions, like, what if this happens? How would you do it? So, because I want to see how they're drawing from their experience and how they can apply. And I'm looking for independence. At that stage, I'm looking for, can you independently drive projects or drive tasks? Um, uh, so yeah, that's what I would look for when I'm interviewing mid to senior CRAs.
Okay, so you're looking for problem-solving skills, ability to develop strong relationships, that mix between the technical skills and the soft skills. I think these are all, really important, Kitaki, because we work in an industry that is just so fast-paced and constantly changing. So I think these skills are needed for that, to be able to, you know, work with the sites and be able to influence them through all of these, sometimes like the ambiguity that comes with things and the changing priorities. I think this skill set is very key for that. Let's move on to, can you share one or two role specific questions that you typically ask candidates during interviews?
The way I would respond to this question is I would divide it into like two parts. Like when I am interviewing an early stage candidate, a typical question for me would look like, what do they know about the industry? What do they understand about the role? I want to see, like, are they just applying for applying, or have they done some research? Like, are they self-motivated to say, like, yeah, I talked to my professor, or I know colleagues, or my friends are in this industry and they talk about this and I've seen them do this and that's what interests me. So like I said, for an early or a very green with experience CRA, I typically would ask them, like, what do they understand about the industry? What do they know about the role? Ask them, like, if they have a research background, like a bachelor's education journey, if they've done research, like, what was their experience? What did they like the most? So I'm trying to really understand what drives them to apply to this role because they're so green. And then for a mid to experienced CRA, again, I'm looking for more situational type of questions. So I would ask them questions like, if the PI disagrees, if he's underreporting adverse events, for example, how would you approach that situation? Because that's sensitive. You don't want to tell a doctor he doesn't know what he's doing, but it is a clinical trial you're running, or you're managing, or you're a part of. So more situational questions, again, going back to the skill sets I'm looking for. I'm not going to ask them how do they maintain trial master file, because I'm going to assume it's a given, right? You are where you are because you've shown that you can do the technical aspect of the job. But I'm looking for, yeah, like more situational, relationship driven, like multitasking. Can you handle stressful situations? How do you risk mitigate? Like, you see a risk for the trial, how do you escalate that? How do you make sure that we have things in place to mitigate those risks? So it's a lot broader umbrella that I would go for with my questions.
Yeah, this resonates with me too. This is also what I look for. So, we'd want to know, what do you know about the industry and what is driving you to apply to the role, versus in late stage, it would be more situational questions that are specific to the role that would help us understand how they approach problems, right? I think those two are the key differentiators there.
Yeah.
Okay. Perfect, perfect. I do want to advise our listeners again, if you are interested in the in-house CRA role and advancing within this path, you now have a list of critical skills. So go to biotechrolefittings.com for a free copy of a biotech specific resume, a career planning form to help you develop a CRA specific resume, tailor your job search, and prepare for interviews. For those of you who don't have clinical research experience, I do recommend that you complete the free clinical research certificate courses that are sponsored by the NIH and add them to the resume. So this will help you better understand the why behind the activities and the different roles that are involved in clinical research. And as Ketaki was saying, it'll show commitment also to moving into our industry. So go to the CRA page at biotechrolefittings.com for the links to these free courses. And then for my listeners who are undecided on a role or who may be feeling burnt out, I encourage you to make a list of activities that you do enjoy and things you never want to do again, like no matter how good you are at them, and use this as a guide to find the role that is right for you, because there's a lot of roles in our field and there's so many things that you can, move laterally into. You'll find something, I guarantee you. It's tempting, to try to compare ourselves to others in similar roles or promotions or titles, the money they make, but that is definitely the path to burnout. You do you, and make sure that you are interviewing your interviewers, right? Because as Kataki mentioned, she interviews also for culture. You should also be interviewing for that. You should be interviewing for value alignment, culture alignment. I will be adding some key interview questions on our website, but in the meantime, I recommend that you follow Brianna Doe on LinkedIn. I love her authenticity and the advice she gives on interviewing your interviewer and ways to simplify your job search. All right, so that was my 2 cents, Kataki. Sorry, I know that was a little long, but do you have any other advice for our listeners today?
Yeah, I would just say that, you know, be willing to put in the work, be willing to do the hard work. I feel like, just in general, because I've been a people leader and managing CRAs, there is a little bit of shift from when I started and when I joined the industry and how I moved through my career. My focus was to build that foundation, because once I have the strong foundation, all the building blocks that come on top of it become easier. The journey becomes easier versus moving through those chains faster, like looking for that next step. Oh, I've been in-house CRA one for 1 year. What's next? I want to do a CRA two. I want to be a senior CRA in like 2.5 years. If you go too fast, at a very critical point in your career, you're going to have to stop and be like, oh, I wish I would have spent a lot more time, being a CRA two, for example, and gaining that experience. And sometimes it's a matter of time than your skill set. So I
Mm-hmm.
really, really think I see that big difference now when I manage CRAs. They want to, like they want to become a director in like 3 years, which is great. And kudos to that type of motivation and goal.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't want to struggle at that level, right? And
Right.
how do you make sure you don't struggle at that level is to take your time to, early on in your career, build your skill set. Even if you're in a CRA 2 role for 4 years, it's okay, as long as you're learning and growing, right? You're gaining the skill sets, you're learning new things, working with different people, because the journey forward is, I think personally, because that's how I have managed my career, is easier, because now you have a strong foundation. So yeah, just advice would be, be willing to put in the work, be willing to stay in a role for some time. It's okay. And like Claudia was saying, it's tempting to see folks around and be like, oh, she became a vice president, in like 10 years.
Mhm.
Everybody has a different journey. You cannot compare to each other, but yeah, just put in the work, and as long as you're learning and having fun, and be an active participant in your career journey. I have had fortunately really good mentors in my educational journey, in my career professional industry journey, but I still had to drive my career. They gave me advice, they gave me some pathways, but I had to do the work. So don't feel like somebody else is going to do it for you. You have to be in the driving seat of your career journey. And the third thing I would give an advice on is be willing to take risks, because you never know what you find out about yourself. And it's, again, all these advices are coming from my personal experience, I get that, but I found a lot more about myself, and I took those risks and I took those challenges on, and I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm going to figure it out. So I would say those three things really resonate with me.
Yeah, I do, I know that you're saying that this is really tied to your own experience, but every single one of these points is so critical, I think, to being able to not just advance in your career, but advance in the right path that's for you, like right path for you, right? I think being in those roles for a little bit longer helps you understand all the nuances and, like you said, build the foundation. It also gives you can also take your time in learning about what everybody else does around you too. And, through that you may find that maybe you're in the right spot or maybe you're not, and you can pivot. But, I think we're both aligned on, if you're just focused on moving up, you may find yourself in a position where it could possibly be hard for you to perform well, or you may find that it's just not the right thing for you because you didn't have the time earlier to figure out who you are, put your like you said, also taking risks and putting yourself in situations where you're learning something new, and along the way you're also learning something new about yourself. So I think, Kentucky, although these are very tied to your experience, I think these are all really good. This is really good advice. Be willing to do the hard work, be an active participant in your career journey, even if you have mentors, and just be willing to take risks. Awesome. Well, Kentucky, it's been really great catching up with you. And thank you again for sharing your career journey and insights on the Conscious Biotech Exec.
Thank you, Claudia, for having me.